Hey everybody, Mike Miller with the Herald-Times, joined by columnist Andy Graham, coming to you from the Horseshoe here in Columbus, Ohio, after another, honestly, a fairly close Indiana-Ohio State football game. Another classic.
For most of the day, I don't know about classic, but it was close. Indiana played competitively for a good long while.
Yeah, and that's kind of what we've seen the last 3-4 years, really, in this matchup ever since Kevin Wilson's taken over. Hey, this was the first time in 6 years that Indiana's held Ohio State under 400 yards. So another fairly competitive game from Indiana against the nation's
There's
number 2 team.
There's just no doubt the defense is better. I mean, it's
I
just clear at this point. We've been through 5 games now, and I think the trend is apparent. The defense is better. In fact, at times, it's the offense that's struggling.
It is. It's clearly.
And so I don't really have many qualms about Coach Kevin Wilson and his staff figuring it out on offense. So if they do, in a complete sense, this could be a pretty complete football team at some juncture. And they weren't quite good enough today. They were a little bit too sloppy. A couple of mistakes really hurt. But it was 24-10 at halftime, and 2 of Ohio State's touchdowns were basically gift wrapped.
Yeah.
And those mistakes hurt. But it wasn't like Indiana was in any way outclassed. I mean, I think there was about 10 yards difference in total yardage at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And Ohio State ended up with 100 more yards or so than Indiana. But it's not a game where Ohio State just roared up and down the field and Indiana couldn't corral them. There were a couple of drives that were that way, but by and large not. Indiana's players were in position to make plays. Defensively, they made tackles when they generally had to make tackles. And I'll tell you what, that is a really good Ohio State football team. I mean, there's just speed everywhere. It's one thing to watch them on TV. It's another thing to watch them live from up on high in the press box here. And you can really see it.
Mm-hmm.
They just fly. And for Indiana to control that, I mean, Ohio State came in averaging 57 points a game. Well,
like 530, 40 yards a game. I mean,
right, and had 383 today.
Yeah.
So, and it wasn't because Indiana was dominating the time of possession offensively or anything. It was because the defense is playing better,
making plays, absolutely making plays. And like you said, I mean, this had appeared to be at least a very airtight offense. They weren't really making many mistakes. Second nationally in the turnover margin, +8 there, and yet on the third play of the game, Pat Doherty's in the backfield after just a bad pitch by J.T. Barrett. He's fallen on that, recovering a fumble.
Right.
Indiana's right there on the doorstep, and like we saw so often today, I mean, in that red zone, that the offense is just kind of terrible, frankly.
Really bad. Play calling is puzzling to a degree, without doubt, and very conservative, I think, in large part. Out of Indiana's first 30 snaps today, 23 were runs. Mm-hmm. And against that defense, I mean, that's tough sledding. You're still playing without Dan Feeney, your All-American guard. I mean, it's not going to be easy. And, they only get 3 points out of that. I mean, another really crucial point in the game in the fourth quarter, Indiana's only down 2 touchdowns. A'Shawn Riggins, who's played really well at cornerback. I mean, Indiana's cornerback play is as good as I've seen it in a long time right now, with Rashard Fann and A'Shawn Riggins, and Tyler Green had a nice pass breakup today. But A'Shawn gets his first career interception as a kid from Hamilton, Ohio, down near Cincinnati, played for the same team that Marcus Oliver, the linebacker, did. Anyway, he picks off J.T. Barrett at set sail, and Indiana ends up with a 1st and goal on the 6, but once again just stagnates and ends up trying a 4th and 1 conversion, tries a power run off of left guard, left tackle, and just gets stuffed. Left guard Wes Martin had a really good day generally, but for whatever reason that play didn't go, and so I'm sure A'Shawn will remember his first career interception, but it would have been more memorable if Indiana would have gotten points out of it.
Yeah, it was just that kind of day. I mean, you kind of expect that coming into a game against Ohio State, which, again, is just supremely talented and really, really good.
Really good.
But, again, I think, the positive takeaway for Indiana was to actually see them stacking up relatively well against, obviously the Big Ten's best, arguably the nation's best, coming in here and playing like that. But, again, we talk about the defense, but the offense, again, I don't want to say – well, it is. It's disappointing right now. And you're 5 games in, and you're not closing where you should close in the red zone. Again, you're stagnating with some of that. I mean, to me, there are times it just doesn't seem like there's a lot of trust there in that passing game, whether it's in Lego or some of the personnel in general. I mean, their first 20, I mean, they ran it 25 times in the first half, average 1.8 yards per carry.
Yeah.
Really had the reins on Lego throughout the entire time. I mean, there were some clear opportunities to take some shots, and they just refused to do it.
Yeah, to me, I mean, I still think they're reacting to that 5 interception game. And as Kevin Wilson himself has said, I mean, that wasn't all Lego's fault. But I think they felt like that really burned them.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it cost them a game where they outgained Wake Forest 6-11 to 353 or something.
Right.
I mean, and they lost because they made 5 turnovers. So I think last week they came in looking to try to get the game against Michigan State to the second half, play pretty conservatively, trust the defense, and it worked out. I mean, they ended up getting a win, and I think they did that again today, kind of came in looking to not make any really crucial errors early, but there's such a small margin of error against Ohio State. I mean, that's such an explosive team. You know they're going to score some points eventually, so you're going to have to score some points.
Mm-hmm.
And once again, it just, to me, it was too close to the vest, too often. And, look, I'm just a sports writer sitting up in a press box. I don't know football it's hard to second guess coaches in terms of play calling, I think, because they know so much more than any of the rest of us know, and they know what the defense is giving. They know what the looks, are on the field. They're often making checks right at the line of scrimmage. They call a pass and a run every down, and then they decide which one to run, and that's often predicated on what the defense is showing. So a lot of it just comes down to execution too. You got to execute. This has been a team that's been able to run the ball pretty well the last few years. Right now, it's not running the ball very well, and so that's part of it too. I mean, the play calling wouldn't seem as questionable if the running plays were being executed better. Mm-hmm. But I do think also there is there's something there about the passing game that they don't fully trust. And in the first half, when Indiana threw the ball, it was effective. There were open receivers out there. Ohio State was not defending the pass all that great. I mean, there aren't many things on this Ohio State team that it looked like weaknesses to me, but both throwing the ball, because J.T. Barrett wasn't particularly accurate today, and then defending the throw. I didn't think Ohio State was great. I thought they were terrific everywhere else. And in everything else they did, they were terrific. But both defending the pass and throwing the ball, I thought Ohio State was average at best today. And here's the deal. I mean, I think it was interesting coming into today. I think Ohio State is probably the best team in the country.
I would agree, yeah.
And I was curious whether or not Indiana could remain competitive against them as they have been for the previous 5 years, pretty much. And I think they pretty much were. I mean, anybody could have watched this game and could have, I think, come to the conclusion that an upset was not out of the question. The way the game unfolded, Indiana was playing them pretty competitively, and with a break or two and a few, maybe 2 or 3 fewer mistakes, Indiana could have been right there, and certainly they could have been tied or better at halftime, for example. So, I don't know. It's hard to see exactly how much to read into that, but I think it augurs reasonably well for the future. I think Richard Lego's good. I think Indiana's offense is pretty potent. I think they're going to get Dan Feeney back at some point.
This year, by the way.
Yeah, and I think that maybe Kemi and Patrick gets unveiled truly at some point. Maybe more weaponry will be deployed at some point. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see. Next week's a huge one against Nebraska, which is a pretty similar team to Indiana in many respects, I think. But they're ranked number 12. They're undefeated. Indiana's 3-2, but it's Indiana's homecoming. That's going to be a really interesting game. I mean, last week's win over Michigan State has lost a little luster. The Michigan State lost at home today to BYU. So once again, it's a little bit too early to gauge exactly how good this Indiana team is or isn't. But like last year when they were very competitive with the elite teams in the Big Ten, I think this team potentially is competitive with the elite teams in the Big Ten. And I think that we'll see how many games they can win, but I think they got a chance to win pretty much any of them.
To be quite honest, I kind of saw what I wanted to see from this Indiana team by and large. Obviously, there's a lot more. The ceiling's a lot higher for this offense. Although we've seen some really nice throws by Richard Lego. There's one, it was like a third down throw along the Ohio State sideline, just flipped it right over.
Nick Westbrook.
Yeah, it was a beautiful throw. I mean, there's
Pinpoint.
that capacity there for this offense, and you want to see that just a little bit more often. You want to see him in position just to have those opportunities to make those throws a little more often.
Yep.
We didn't see that a whole lot today, but defensively, again, I mean, to actually come into this place and play well again, making open field tackles. I mean, they're actually making open field tackles.
They are.
I mean, they're in position to make those tackles too, which is big too. But yeah, I like what I see from this defense, and I feel fairly confident that at some point, sooner or later, this offense is going to open up.
Yep.
I mean,
that's what I think too. I mean, I really do, and we'll see. I mean, it's not going to get. The schedule is very challenging, but I'm really intrigued about next week's game. I really am. I mean, I think it's a heck of a matchup. First Nebraska visit to Bloomington in eons.
I am hip ran for like 3,000 yards.
I was present as a student in that in the stands that game, and I remember it as the parting of the Red Sea game. Because the red jerseys Indiana defenders were parted with virtually every snap, and frankly, you or I could have gained yards that game. But I am hip, who has maybe the premier name in the history of college football, ran amok that day. It was before Lee Corso really kind of got it going with pretty good teams at Indiana. They weren't good enough defensively yet at that point. But a lot of people might be surprised if they don't know that Indiana leads the all-time series against Nebraska. Played a lot of those games back in the 40s and 50s.
What is it, like 4-3?
It's like 5-3. I don't know. I have to look it up. But Indiana has a couple of games lead in the series. But it's great to have the Huskers on the schedule finally. It'll be great to make a trip to Lincoln finally when Indiana goes out there. But great to have a great program coming in to play for homecoming next week. And I think this is a very intriguing Indiana team that hasn't completely fleshed itself out yet. It hasn't been completely revealed yet. It's going to be interesting to see how they do flesh it out.
It's still a very interesting team to follow. Fascinating team, honestly. I mean,
yes,
I kind of feel like they're right on the bubble right now. Really, they're close.
Anytime Indiana starts playing halfway decent defense, that makes it interesting, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. This is far different from what we're used to coming here watching.
Yep.
So, all right, guys, we'll see you soon.
Thanks.